Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava, Batra, Daf and Bav. This week's learning is sponsored by Adam, Carolyn, Michal, Josh, Benny, Izzy, Shim, Zoe, and Yehuda in loving memory of Fred Ephraim Hofstadter. Dad and Saba, we miss you every day. Today's daf is sponsored by Rochelle Chefetz in loving memory of Lenny Chefetz, Zichrono Lebracha, whose 32nd yahrzeit is today. You were loved by all and taken much too soon. Okay, today's daf, we have a study guide. And before we start, I want to just mention that if you haven't seen it yet, we are starting a new campaign for Rosh Hashanah. It's a journey to Rosh Hashanah. It's basically learning the 10 dapim of Masechet Rosh Hashanah. You might remember Rosh Hashanah starts off with all sorts of other topics about the Arba Rosh Hashanim. From there gets into Kiddush HaChodesh, how they determine the new moon. But we're going to take the last 10 dapim, which all focus on Rosh Hashanah. And basically, it's learn 10 dapim in 10 days. We'll have a program at the end. And it's being run by Abigail Gross-Gelman, who's going to be giving short intros to every daf and then using the archives of all the shiurim that we learned together. So basically, it's a way to just remind you of the materials for Rosh Hashanah. We'll try to do this throughout with, different years, take different parts of Sefto for different holidays, and it's a good way to review the dapim that are connected to the holidays. So if you're interested, if you want to share with others, find the registration. It's done a little differently than last time. It's more through, it'll be more like the courses. You register for a course, and then every day you'll get an email with the notifications. You can also join the WhatsApp group, and the link to the class will be there, where you'll have the video, the short video, the second video, and if there's a study guide. So you're welcome to join. You're welcome to share with others. It's a great opportunity to get people involved in learning that don't want to necessarily commit or don't know yet that they want to commit to Daf Yomi, and to interest them in learning Gemara in some way and prepare for Rosh Hashanah. So it starts on Sunday, this coming Sunday, and it goes 5 days, Sunday to Thursday, and then 5 days, Sunday to Thursday, and the final event is the Sunday before Rosh Hashanah. So you can find details. You can Google it on Journey to Rosh Hashanah, and you'll find it there. And it'll be up on our site also. Should be up on the homepage. If it's not there yet, it will be by today. So that's exciting. Okay, well, let's get started. We're started yesterday with a machloket Rav and Shmuel. When we finally finished all those agadatot, we got back to this, the boat and acquiring a boat. The Mishnah was all about someone who sells a boat, what parts are included. Now we're going to sort of zoom out. How do you acquire a boat in general? And Rav and Shmuel say you do it with Mashicha. You pull the boat because you can't lift the boat. That's the ideal way of acquiring an item. You can't lift a boat, so you pull it like an animal. How far do you have to pull it? Well, according to Shmuel, you have to pull it the whole boat's length so that it's completely in a different space than it was before. Rav says you just have to pull it a little bit. So even though part of the boat is where the other part of the boat was a minute ago, doesn't matter. As long as you pulled it a little bit, that's sufficient. We tried to say maybe the machloket is based on some other machloket. We said, no, it's not about an animal. We said it's not the same thing. And now we're going to start with another suggestion. This one's going to take a little while to prove. And I'll just preface this. If we want to talk about methodology, we're going to quote a braita with a machloket between tannaim. And we're going to read this braita several different times, meaning each time there's a problem with the braita for sure. And in order to resolve problems with braitot, they have the rabbis have the ability, the amoraim, to edit them and say, this is missing. This really meant that. Okay. Today we're going to do this several times. Okay. Only in the fourth reading, okay, you're going to get lost, because only in the fourth reading are we going to get back to why we brought this in the first place. And when we get to reading number 4, we're going to say, oh, wait, there's another issue. Must be they debate the issue that Rav and Shmuel are debating. Okay. And that's what then we're going to reject that reading also, and then read it again another time. So that's why I created a study guide. I thought it would make it much clearer. Okay, so let's start. Lema kahane tonight. Let's suggest that it's the same, the Rav and Shmuel debate, and I'm going to now pull up the study guide, is the same debate as Kamma and Rabbi Natan. So let's see. Ditanya. I'm at the very bottom of Ayin Hamabet. Svina niknet b'mishicha. Rabbi Natan omer, Svina va'otiyot niknot b'mishicha u'b'shtar. Okay, let's just start with the braita, and already you can see from the chart that there's a problem. Okay, why is there a problem? Because there's a whole box that's empty here. So something doesn't exactly make sense because of that, and we'll get to that in a minute. The question is how to acquire boats. That's the first question. Let's just deal with that. Kamma says Mashicha, you pull it. Okay, that makes sense. It fits with Rav and Shmuel. It's just a matter of how far, but you pull the boat. Rabbi Natan says it's not enough to pull the boat. You have to do Mashicha and Shtar. That means we have to pull the boat, but also we have to have a document writing, I am selling you this boat. Okay, and then you take the document and now the boat's yours. But also there's a debate about otiyot. Otiyot are letters. What do we mean by letters? Well, you'll see by the end of today why they call them letters. Letters is a promissory note. Okay? This means you owe me money, say $100, and I want the money back, but it's not due yet, let's say. So what I do is I sell my promissory note to somebody else because I need the money. And they buy the rights to this promissory note. Okay, so let's assume I sell to Ruth my promissory note for $100. So you owe me $100, or let's take Ruth and Naomi so we can go back to names. Naomi owes me $100, but now Naomi owes it to Ruth because I sold the document to Ruth. Okay, for how much I sold it, right? One could imagine that I could probably sell it only for less money than it's worth because there's always a chance that Naomi will renege on the loan and not pay back. And also it's paying for Ruth to get the money. And Ruth is giving me rights, right? So maybe I'll sell it to her for less money. It doesn't really matter. That's not the point. The point is, how does she acquire this shtar chov? Now, the most obvious would be I give her the shtar chov, right? That would be a good way to acquire it. And then she pulls it, okay, or lifts it or something like that. But comes Rabbi Natan and says, Otiyot niknot b'mishicha u'b'shtar. You have to both, Ruth has to pull the shtar chov, and we have to write a document, a new document. Don't confuse. There's an original document, which says Naomi owes me money. And there's a second document we're going to write now, which says, I am giving Ruth the rights to collect my original document. Why do we have to do this? Well, because if I give Ruth the document, now a document is a piece of parchment. Maybe it could be used for something else. And maybe I only gave her the paper, and it was the paper or the parchment that she gets. So therefore, we need also to draft a new document that explains, and at the end of today's talk, we're going to see what actually really needs to be written. And if that's not written, it's still not clear, is that she gets the rights to collect this loan from Naomi, and we have to have a document attesting to that. So Mashicha, and it's two things. She takes the shtar, pulls it, the original document, and a new document. But the problem with this braita is, as I said before, is that something's missing in the braita. What's missing? Well, so the Gemara asks, Otiyot man dechal shmayu. The structure of this braita is problematic. Tanakama spoke only about a boat, and Rabbi Natan wanted to disagree about the boat, but then also mentions Otiyot. Where did Otiyot come from? It's like out of the blue. Nobody was talking about Otiyot, that Rabbi Natan was responding and saying Otiyot b'mashicha b'shtar. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, they don't like braito to all of a sudden in the second part of the braita, you add something new in. And this thing about man dechar shemayu means like mi hiskir shmam. Like, who mentioned them? What are you bringing in something from the outside? To which the Gemara says, okay, so there must be something missing. It must be Tanakama addressed Otiyot also. And chisur mechasre v'hachi katani, it's missing words, and this is how it should read. Svina nikne b'mishicha v'otiyot b'misira. Okay, now, svina is bought by mishicha, by pulling it. And the Rashbam says, why is otiyot different according to the rabbis, to Tanakama, that you need misira. What's misira? Handing over. It's not just enough that it's sitting there and the new owner pulls it. There has to be this transfer. Why is it different? Well, the Rashbam says very logically, Mashicha eno ela b'davar shegufo mamon. And we've talked about this so many times, that shtar is different because a shtar doesn't have inherent value. Right? Again, its inherent value is just as much as it's a piece of paper. Right? It doesn't have inherent value. It only has value for, and that's why they call it otiyot, letters, for what's written in it. And therefore, you need to do mesira and not mashicha. That's Tanakama. And then, now, it doesn't say this in the braita, but this is reading number 2. We're going to we're going to edit the braita and assume that they must have disagreed in some way. So in what way would they disagree? They said, Otiopa Misira, and Rabbi Natan Omer, Sfina Otiot, Niknopa Mishicha Vishtar. And then, works very well, because now Rabbi Natan disagrees on two issues. Okay, and let's look. So all we did was change one thing. We filled in this blank, right? B'misira. Okay, every time we change something, I put it in gray highlighted. So Otiopa Misira, and that's as opposed to Sfina b'mishicha as opposed to Rabbi Natan, who says Mishicha en shtar. And Otiot, Tanakama says Rabbi Misira, and Rabbi Natan says, no, number one, I don't think it's Misira, it's Mishicha, and also Bishtar. Okay, it's not enough Misira because, again, it doesn't have inherent, it's not enough Mishicha alone because it doesn't have inherent value. Therefore, you need to do Bishtar so that there's no confusion about what exactly Ruth acquired. However, we have a bit of a problem because while we explained very well why a shtar chov needs Mashicha and shtar, why on earth would a boat need Mashicha and shtar, right? Because remember, what did Rabbi Natan, and we didn't really focus on this. It seemed to fit well because there's a debate. Kamma says Mashicha, Rabbi Natan says Mashicha and shtar. But the Gemara is going to ask now, shtar the sfina lamali. Why on earth would Rabbi Natan require a shtar for a sfina? Mitatali, it's mitatali. And we know that any kind of movable property, mitatali is movable property, any kind of movable property is acquired by pulling or by lifting or all the regular means of acquiring. Definitely not shtar. So, right, shtar is for land, for slaves, not for this kind of thing. Elalav hachi katani. So therefore, reading number 3. Okay, so now we are already going to keep the Masira for the Otiot. We added that in and we're going to keep that in. But now we have to fix the boat and Rabbi Natan. So what are we going to say here? Elalav hachi katani. Reread the braita and read it like this. Svina nikne b'mishicha v'otiot b'misira. Okay, so far that's the same as we had in reading number 2. The svina is acquired by pulling the Rabbi and the otiot are b'misira. That's all Tanakama's opinion. Okay, remember, otiot are different because they don't have inherent value, so Mashicha won't work. You have to do Masira, passing from one to the other. But Rabbi Natan omer, Sfina b'mishicha. Okay, Rabbi Natan says, Sfina, oh, you don't need a shtar. That's not what Rabbi Natan said. Mashicha is enough for a boat. And otiot are b'shtar. And a shtar chov is going to be with a shtar. Now, I'm already going to tell you that the only way to really read this, and this is, well, according to the Rashbam anyway, and the commentaries, say that when Rabbi Natan says, okay, what we basically did in this case is, when it said Mashicha and shtar, we split those terms and said, oh no, Mashicha is for the boat, shtar is for the shtar chov, okay, for the promissory note. But what's the problem? Well, you can't only have a shtar. There has to be some sort of passing over. So we're going to say the following. When Rabbi Natan says otiot is b'shtar, they mean misira and shtar. In other words, Tanakama said otiot, all you have to do is pass over the shtar from one to the other. And I can pass my rights to collect this chov from Naomi. I just give the shtar to Ruth. Rabbi Natan says it's not enough to give it to Ruth. You also need to write a shtar. Okay, and now we've resolved that. However, there's going to be a problem, which is, if you say this reading, notice from the chart, what's the problem? Well, we're assuming that Tanakama and Rabbi Natan disagree, because otherwise, why would they mention their opinions? So there's a problem, because according to this third reading, Tanakama says a boat is b'mishicha, and Rabbi Natan said a boat is b'mishicha. So sfina b'mishicha, if you're going to now reread Rabbi Natan, that he doesn't say Mashicha and shtar by boat, which is what we just did, but he said boat is b'mishicha only, well, hainu tanakama. Then they say the exact same thing, and then there's no debate, which means that Rabbi Natan should have said, right, I agree with you with this, I disagree about that, or something like that. But here it's viewed as if there's a machlok. Tanakama says sfina b'mishicha otiot b'misira. Rabbi Natan said sfina b'mishicha otiot b'shtar. So it's as if they argue about the sfina. Okay. Now, I told you probably forget how we got here in the first place, and now we're finally there. The Gemara introduced this whole thing. Why don't we suggest that Rav and Shmuel are actually based on a machloket tannaim between Tanakama and Rabbi Natan? So how do we get this? Well, if Tanakama and Rabbi Natan both say b'Mashicha, and they have a debate, which we assume from the structure of the braita, there's a debate. So it must be reading number 4, and this one doesn't really change anything, it just kind of adds in, which is Ela de Rav Shmuel ika benayu. They disagree about the same machloka Rav and Shmuel. Yes, it's true. One says Mashicha and the other says Mashicha. But one says Mashicha of Kol Shehu and the other says Mashicha ad Shim Shochet Kula. One holds like Rav, one holds like Shmuel. Okay, which one is which? Some people say this, some people say that. We'll go with the Rashbam who says Tanakama holds that Mashicha is like Shmuel. You have to pull the boat entirely out of its space. And Rabbi Natan says Kol Shehu is enough, like Rav. Okay, one could say this, one could say that, but yeah, let me just double check that that's kamma tanakama came from Mashicha, right? Kula k'Shmuel. And Rabbi Natan, right? He says that Rabbi Natan comes to add. It's a good question what it means to add here. To add means, it's what the Rashbam's theory is. Why is Rabbi Natan like Rav, that enough, just a little bit is enough? Because the last opinion always adds on to the first. When you have a machloket like that on kind of something similar, but what I'm adding is, yes, but Mashicha, even a little bit of Mashicha is enough. That's called adding. Okay, one can argue, but we'll leave it at that right now. The main point is, again, that after all the changes we made, okay, let's just go through the changes. First, we had to add, what did Tanakama have to say about OTO? Because it doesn't make sense that Rabbi Natan would talk about OTO if Tanakama didn't even mention them. So we said he must think Mesira. And then we moved to, but then how could you possibly need a star for a boat? So we got rid of the star for the boat and we split. We said the Mashiach of Rabbi Natan relates to the boat and the star relates to the star chov. And then we had to just add in, and this you'll only see later in the daf why they added this in the commentaries, that Rabbi Natan agrees with Tanakama that Otiopa Mesira, but adds that it's not enough to pass it over. You also need a star. And then we said, but then boat Mashicha, it must be they disagree about Rav and Shmuel. That was the whole reason why we brought this sugya. But now the Gemara is going to reject this, and you might have known that in the first place because it was introduced as lema kahane tanai. Lema is almost always a suggestion that will be rejected. Why don't we say and then we don't? So let's get to the rejection. Lo, that's not the case. That's not the machloket between them. And in fact, they don't even argue about the boat. And we're going to read the braita like this. They both say Mashicha by a boat. And it could be they both agree with Rav. It could be they both agree with Shmuel. We have no idea. And they actually, right, our assumption was the way the braita sets it up, it must be that they argue about it. But no, in fact, you could read the braita like this. It's not exactly a new reading. It's just kind of going back to the way we read it before and explaining there's really no machloket. The machloket is only about a promissory note. And here's how you read Rabbi Natan's response to Tanakama. In a boat, I totally agree with you. You said Mashicha, I say Mashicha. But OTO, what I added here on the side is like words we're adding to Rabbi Natan's mouth. And he didn't say this, but it's as if he said, oh, I agree with you about this. But when it comes to a promissory note, if you write a new document saying, I'm giving rights to Ruth for the document to collect the money from Naomi, she can get my promissory note and it's acquired to her. If not, not. And on that point, I disagree with you, Tanakama. Okay, again, I agree with you that you do Masira, but I disagree that if you don't have a star, I think it's not going to work. That's the end of this section. Okay, we're going to continue this section, but kind of off on a tangent. Because again, why did we bring this? Because we were talking about acquiring a boat, and we had a machloket Rav and Shmuel. How much? How long? How much does it need to be pulled? We thought that the machloket between them was the same as the machloket of Rabbi Natan and the rabbis. For that purpose, we brought this braita. And in the end, after editing and editing and editing, fourth reading was, in the end, actually, they agree when it comes to Mashiach of a boat. But yet, we assume they disagree, so it must be they disagree about how much to pull the boat. Okay, whether you take the Rashbam or others who say the opposite, who says what, but that must be the debate. And then the Gemara rejects it and said, actually, they really don't deliberate. They have no debate about the boat. They only debate about the promissory note. Now we're going to start from that last point, that they disagree about the promissory note, and we're going to go off on a tangent about promissory notes, which has nothing anymore to do with our sugya, but because we brought up this braita, we're going to say the following. And here, methodologically, I want to point out, as I mentioned before it said, lema kahane tanai, which meant, why don't we suggest that the machloket between Rav and Shmuel is the same as this machloket tannaim? Now the Gemara is going to use different words to say the exact same thing, and the different words make all the difference. Ubeplugta dahane tanai. And the machloket, now, okay, before it was two amoraim, and we wanted to say, oh, these two amoraim have the same debate as these other tannaim, right? Totally different time periods. One time of the people who wrote the Mishnah and the braita and the Tosafot. One, the time period of the amoraim who wrote the Gemara. Now we're going to say this machloket tannaim, the Tanakam and Rabbi Natan, about which again, there's no debate about the boat. The promissory note debate is actually the same machloket as two other tannaim. So now we're within the same Tanaitic time period, but we're going to say there's two machlokot that are exactly the same. Okay, and this one matches up to this person, this one matches up to this person, and the methodological point is different. Besides that, it's tanaim and tanaim, but that's not such a. I mean, it's different, but the main difference is notice how it's introduced. There's no word lema. Lema is let us suggest, which is going to be rejected. This says tonight, and this is the same machloket as two other tanaim. And although we're going to deliberate a little bit, are these really parallel? And we're going to have something kind of similar as before, where they thought it was parallel, and they said it's not. We're going to try to knock out this parallel sugya, and maybe this doesn't really match up, but in the end, we're going to conclude that it matches up. So it might be a little bit hard to get there, but we'll get there. Okay, or again, it'll be hard to stay there. To get there is pretty simple. Titania, here's our braita. Okay, I'll pull up the study guide again. Be helpful to follow. So here's our machloket. Okay, it's going to be again a machloket about otiot, and we're going to see that they argue b'sfina also in a different braita. Titania, otiot niknot b'misira divrei Rebbi, v'chachamim omrim ben katav v'lo masar, ben masar v'lo katav, lo kana ad shichtov yimsol. So let's see what they say. Otiot, according to Rebbi, niknot b'misira. That's Tanakama by us. Okay, I brought the whole braita here. Tanakama, Sfina b'mishicha, Rabbi Natan also b'mishicha, Otiot b'misira, and Rabbi Natan b'misira b'shtar. And now on the chart it says, who does it match? Well, Tanakama matches Rebbi, exact same thing. Otiot niknot b'misira, divrei Rebbi. That's exactly what Tanakama said. Rebbi Yehuda Hanasi. V'chachamim omrim, whether Hatav, you wrote a star, but lo masar, but you didn't give the original promissory note over. I didn't give it to Ruth. Or ben masar, I gave her the original promissory note, the lo katav, but I didn't write a new document saying that I'm giving her the rights to collect this loan. Lo kana ad shichtov yimsor. It doesn't work until you do two things. You have to write the document, write a new star, and you have to give the old document over. Now, if you remember, and it's even in parentheses here, Rabbi Natan had said only star. And we said what Rabbi Natan really means is, Tanakama said, Mesira, I agree, Mesira, but it's not enough. You also need a star. And the reason why the Rashbam said it there, that it must be, the Rabbi Natan says Mesira, even though he said star only, he must mean both, is because otherwise, if you look at this machloket, Rebbi and the rabbis, which we assume these all connect, there is no opinion that fits with Rabbi Natan. He thinks only star, well, it doesn't fit with the rabbis, it doesn't fit with Rebbi. That's why it must be, it matches the rabbis, and it must be, you need both. And that Rabbi Natan said star, meaning in addition, you need a star. Okay, that's a side point. If you didn't get it, it's fine. It's just a side point I wanted to point out. Again, methodologically, why did the Rashbam add those words in? So it's just obvious from later on in the sugya. Okay, but the main point here is that we have the exact same machloket. Okay, Rebbi says Mesira, Chachamim say you need Mesira and a star, and that matches Tanakama and Rabbi Natan. But now they say, wait a minute. If we want to say that Tanakama matches Rebbi, well, Tanakama also talked about a boat. What did Tanakama say about a boat? A boat is b'mashicha. Now we're going to bring a braita. Now the braita with Rebbi and the rabbis didn't mention boats. All it mentioned was the shtar chov, the otiot, the promissory note. But now we're going to bring to say that Tanakama matches Rebbi, we're going to have a problem when it comes to the boats, because look at this other source. B'mayu kimta keRebbi, sfinanami tikne b'mesira. If really he holds like Rebbi, Rebbi holds that not only a promissory note's acquired by handing something over, a boat is also acquired by handing something over. Let's just talk for a minute about what does it mean to hand something over. What it means, let's say in an animal, which is the simplest, and then we'll talk about by a boat, it means taking the reins and giving the reins to somebody else. Basically giving, right, the way to access the object. Instead of the person doesn't have to pull the object. According to this, you just get the reins. Okay, it's not like one is stronger than the other. Well, we'll see. Okay, we'll talk about the actions, and it's a more significant action actually by saying I'm giving you the reins, right? It's like you have control over the object. In a boat, right? Let's say there's a rope on the boat. So the rope that's attached to the boat, I would give you the rope, which would then give you the ability to pull it, but you don't actually pull it, right? You get the reins, the rope from me. Okay, that would be the way to acquire the boat. So if what we saw, the Tanakama holds, you have to do Mashicha, you don't do Masira, you do Mashicha. Well, Rebbi, if we want to say that the opinions match up with Rebbi, Tanakama matches up with Rebbi, we have a problem. De Tanya, as it says, Svina nikne b'mesira divrei Rebbi. We can end there, but we're going to read the continuation of the rabbis. But right now, for the moment, we're going to focus on Rebbi. There you have it. A boat is acquired by Masira. And so while it's very nice that Otiot Nikno b'mesira matches up Rebbi, the Tanakama, but the part about the boat doesn't match up because Rebbi says boat by Mesira, by passing over the rope of the boat, and Tanakama says it's Mashicha, pulling the boat. And let's just finish that braita. Chachamim omrim, what do the rabbis say about a boat? Lo kana ad shim shechena. You have to pull it, which actually would match fine with Rabbi Natan. Okay, so that part is okay. You either have to pull it, ad shiskor et mikoma. There's another option, which is to rent the space underneath it. Okay, let's say I'm in your house and you have a boat there and you want to give me the boat. So you say, I'm selling you this boat, and then you rent me the space that the boat is on. So already that's like it's in my domain. Okay, Mashicha usually, by the way, means, and we're going to see this in a minute, it means pulling it into my domain. It's not just pulling it. And in fact, we're going to see that Mashicha doesn't work in the public domain. Because if I pull something in the public domain, I'm not pulling it into my domain because it belongs to nobody, right? It's everyone's land. So it's a bit of a problem. We'll get to that in a second right now. So right now, what's our problem? Okay, let's just look at it on the sheet and it'll be very clear. If we want to establish that the machloka between Tanakama and Rabbi Natan is the same as the machloka between Rebbi and the rabbis, it works very nicely for Otiot, but it doesn't work for the boat because Tanakama said Mashicha and Rebbi said Mesira. But we have a pretty simple answer. Lo kashya. This is not difficult because each source was talking about acquiring a boat in a different type of space. Lo kashya. Kan bereshut harabim, kan besimta. In reshut harabim, in the public domain, you can't acquire objects with Mashicha. You have to do Mesira because pulling, as I just said before, doesn't work. Why? Pulling is an idea. I'm pulling it into my domain. If we're standing in the public domain, I'm not pulling it into my domain. Where would it work? We'll see in a minute. The Gemara is going to say it would work if it's a joint courtyard. So then I at least own this space. Let's say we both jointly own the courtyard and I pull it, and the courtyard's also partly owned by me, so I pulled it in my own domain. Or even we'll see in a simtan, a place that's off to the side of Reshut Harabim. Pulling will work because you're kind of pulling it into your own space. You can kind of own. You don't really own the space in a simta, in a corner, but it's already off the side and not in the major part of the public domain. So that would work. But it doesn't work in the public domain. And that's why in a public domain, you would need to do Mesira. So now we have a very obvious answer, which is, we have, right, Kam b'Reshut Harabim, Kam b'simta. Rebbi and Tanakama actually say the same thing. It's just each source was referring to the acquiring of a boat in a different type of space. The one that said b'Mashicha was talking about in a simta, in one of those side alleys or side spaces in the Reshut Harabim. The source that said Rebbi says b'Masira was talking about in the middle of the public domain. The only way to do it is to pass over, like I said, the animal, the reins, the boat, the rope, right? Then you would pass it from one to the other, and that shows ownership in the public domain. That sounds like a very good resolution. However, there's a problem with this resolution. Why is there a problem with this resolution? Because this resolution assumes that the braita, where Rebbi and the rabbis are arguing, is in, right? Remember, what did Rebbi say? Rebbi said Mesira. Where do you do Mesira? In a public domain. Well, now we're going to have a problem. Why? So let's look. If you're going to say that this has been Mesira, what did the rabbi say? The rabbi said, Lo kana ad shim shechena o ad yiskoret mikoma. We're going to have two problems with saying that the rabbis were talking about in a public domain. Sorry, I skipped a line. B'mayu kimta lahach batraita. But this latter braita, batraita is the last one, like Batra, the last gate. So this last braita, what did you just say? It's bereshut harabim. That doesn't make any sense. Ema seifa, look at the last part of the braita, the rabbis. Chachamim omrim lo kana ad shim shechena o ad shiskoret mikoma. Now, what's the problem? Two problems. Well, if you say until you rent the space underneath this, if you're in the public domain, who are you renting the space from? The space doesn't belong to anybody. So if you say you have to rent the space, one of the ways of acquiring is to rent the space underneath, but we're in the public domain, there is no one who owns the space underneath it. There's no way to rent space in the public domain. Secondly, v'tu, let's go back to the first part of Chachamim. You can't acquire by Meshicha and Reshut Harabim. Didn't we just say that? And not only that, in case you thought, maybe someone thought not. Well, Abaye v'Rava, here's the explanation. And I said we get to this, that we're going to see now what you can acquire in what space. Abaye v'Rava, D'Amrei Travaya, both Abaye and Rava said, Mesira koneh b'Reshut Harabim, u'b'chatzer she'ena shel shnehem. If you and I are doing a sale of movables, and we're in the public domain, or we're in a courtyard that doesn't belong to either of us, Meshicha won't work. You need to do Mesira. You need to pass over the reins, something, to me. When does Meshicha acquire? Meshicha kona besimta ubechatzer shishal shnehem. Okay, besides if I'm in my own domain, but even if I'm not in my own domain, if I'm in a simta, a side alleyway off the public domain, or a courtyard that belongs to both of us, then Meshicha will work. If I lift something, that acquires anything anywhere, because why I'm like lifting it into my own space, that will acquire it everywhere. But that's not really our topic. Anyway, the point being that the rabbis say Meshicha or rent the space underneath. Neither of those fits with the public domain. Neither will work. So if we're going to assume in order to say that Rebbi and Tanakama agree, even though one said Meshicha, one said Mesira, the resolution was, by the boat, the resolution was we're just going to assume that one was talking about the public domain, one was in a more private space. To say that the braita with Rebbi and the rabbis is in the public domain doesn't work at all with the rabbi's opinion. So we're stuck. But we're going to have an answer. Hachi ka'amar. This is what the rabbi said. Ad shi'im shechena, when it said ad shi'im shechena, it didn't mean pull it like a little bit in the public domain. What it meant was, if you're standing in the public domain and you want to acquire this boat that's in the public domain, ad shi'im shechena mereshut harabim lesimta. You have to pull that boat out of the public domain, take it to a private space, and then Meshicha is going to work, okay? In a minute, we're going to see why can't you just do Mesira, okay? It doesn't really make sense. I mean, it's logical. You could say, if you want to do Meshicha, pull it all the way to this private space. But it doesn't really make sense why you can't do Mesira, but we'll get back to that. Ve'im reshut ba'alim hi, and if you happen to be in the space of the owner of the object that you're acquiring it from, lo kana ad sheyiskoret mikoma. Now we split the two cases. One is talking about we're in the public domain, and that's why you need to do Meshicha, but what it means is you need to moshech, to pull it all the way out of that domain to a domain where Meshicha will work. If it's in the space of the seller, like you're in their store, you're in their house, and you're buying this boat from them, then you would have to rent, or one way to do it would be to rent the space. They could rent you the space where the boat is sitting, and then since you own that space, you're going to own the boat. Again, just remember, This is only if we made an agreement we were buying the boat. If you rent me this place and there happens to be a boat on it, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to acquire the boat. But if we were talking about a boat and then I did it, right? Or if I pulled your boat, it doesn't mean it's mine unless we were talking about selling it. It's not like I could just go take your object and pull it and it's mine. Okay, just to be clear about that. So now we're going to have another problem though. According to this, what's the issue? There's one more issue, which is, what did Abai and Rava say? You acquire in Reshut Rabim by Masira, right? So Lema Abai v'Rava da'amar Rebbi. Well, the rabbis just said Masira doesn't work. The rabbis said if you're in the public domain, you have to pull it into this simta. So Abai and Rava who say in the public domain you can do Masira, sounds like they disagree with the rabbis, and that's never good because we always assume that the Amoraim are going to follow the mainstream opinion. The mainstream opinion is the rabbis because there are more people than Rebbi. We always follow the majority over the individual. So according to what we just said, Abai and Rava, who said in the public domain you do Masira, and the rabbis didn't allow Masira, doesn't make any sense. Okay, like something in this picture doesn't work because Abai and Rava should be following the rabbis. So we're now going to reinterpret this machloket between them by qualifying the machloket. They don't debate every case. Really, a general case, if I'm acquiring a boat in the public domain and I do Masira, you pass me the rope, everyone thinks that this works. And we're going to read that right now. Amarav Ashi, Ida Amarle, it's really going to depend on what the seller said. Ida Amarle, if the seller said, Lech Hazek Ukne. Okay, so again, this is all part of, like I said, if we're going to do Masira, you're going to pass me the ropes of the boat or whatever kind of act of acquiring we're going to do. It's always going to come with some words, or either written or said, which is the seller of the boat says to me, go and do a chazaka and acquire it. And then Masira works according to everybody. Even the rabbis agree with that. If we're in the public domain, you pass me the ropes. After you said those words, of course it works. And now we're going to really narrow the debate, even though we thought they debated all sorts of cases, any kind of basic case. Okay. Hachanami, hachabamayaskina, da amarle lech mishoch ukne. Sorry, ida amarle, I didn't read that right. Ida amarle lech chazek ukne hachinami. That would work. Meaning the rabbis would agree Masira works. And then they fit in with Abai and Rava fit in with the rabbis because that's a basic case. What's the case here that they debate? If we're standing in the public domain and you're selling me your boat and you say, go pull it and acquire it. Now here we're a little bit stuck. What would it mean to go pull and acquire? I'm in the public domain. Pulling doesn't work. The only thing it could mean, according to the rabbis, is go pull it into a simta, into a place where you can acquire it by pulling. And when you said go pull it, right, and then I now have to pull it into the private domain or some sort of simta, you meant only pulling, meaning I'm not selling this to you unless, and some people read it as, unless you make a big effort, right? To pull the boat is not so easy. I'm willing to sell it to you, you say to me, but you're going to have to work for it. So Chachamim omrim, okay, so Mar Savar, that's the rabbis, Kpeda, when you said, go pull it and then you'll acquire it, you meant it literally. Only if you pull it will you acquire it. Umar Savar, and Rebbi holds, what did Rebbi say? Again, we're qualifying the machloket. All they said was the sfina. Do you acquire it by Masira or do you acquire it by Mashicha, right? Which meant Mashicha all the way to a simta. Well, now we're going to say they only have a debate if you said go pull it. If you said go pull it, the rabbis say you meant that literally. Only if you pull it will you acquire it. But, or only if I pull it will I acquire it. But the rabbis, Rebbi says, you were just saying go pull it, meaning acquire it in any way you want. If you want, you could pull it all the way to a simta, or you could do masir, or you could do anything. They don't take the word so literally. Doesn't mean the person meant only if you pull it. Okay, and therefore we've seen this term mar'eh makom, right? It doesn't mean right, go get the get in that place. Remember, and then we had a debate. Did you mean only in that place the shaliach should give her the get, or was the shaliach saying you'll probably find her in that place, but not saying it's the only way to do it? The same idea here. And that's the machloka between them, and we finally resolved it. Okay, so to do a quick review of this section, then we'll finish up the daf. What we did was we started to say Tana kamma, Rabbi Natan have the exact same debate as Rebbi and the rabbis, which in the end is true. It is the same debate, but we had some issues along the way. First question was, how could you say Masira, right? It fits very well with the OTO, with the promissory note, but with the boat it doesn't fit because Tana kamma said B'shicha, Rebbi said Masira. And then we just said one is Rishud Rabim, one is Rishud, one is like a more private, the Simta. And then they were talking about different scenarios. But then we said, if you're saying Rebbi was talking about in Rishud Rabim, how does the rabbis make any sense? And finally, we ended up understanding it, that they're really talking about a very unique case where you said, Lech Mishoch Knei. And then the rabbi said, you're going to have to pull it. Even though you're in the public domain, you're going to have to pull it all the way to the private domain. And that's because you really meant it. We assume you meant it literally. And Rebbi says, no, we don't assume you meant it literally. We don't take your words that seriously. Okay, last part of the sugya. We're back to the promissory note because we got into that. And now we want to understand better when we write a shtar that goes with this promissory note. So I write a shtar to Ruth that I'm selling her the rights to this promissory note. Rav Papa says, in this document, I have to say to Ruth that I'm giving you, you will acquire this piece of paper, this document, and all the shiabudim that come with it, meaning all the rights that this document gives to you, meaning the rights to collect this loan from Naomi, the rights to collect it from her lien property. You have to add those words. So Amar Rav Ashi didn't really understand this. Amarita l'shmata k'mei de Rav Kahana. I quoted this halacha of Rav Papa to Rav Kahana, va'amarle, and I sent it. It only works if I write those words in the document. If I didn't write those words, it wouldn't work. What do you mean? What else could I possibly mean? Okay, and now he's going to say it in some rhetorical kind of way. What could I possibly mean if I said to Ruth, I'm giving you this document of Naomi's? What? Is Ruth going to use it as a cover to her jug? Right, as the paper itself. In other words, what use does this paper have other than what it says in the paper? So if I'm already, now we did say if I just give her the paper, maybe it's not so clear because maybe it's just paper. But Rav Ashi is saying, once you write a document saying, I'm giving you rights to this document, I'm going to write a document that says, I'm giving you rights to this document so you can use it as a cover for your jug. That doesn't really make any sense. To which, and therefore, why would you need to write, isn't that obvious? To which we'll end the daf with Rav Kahana's interesting answer. I'm really in. Let's Yes, it could be that you're just getting the rights to, that Ruth is only getting the rights to use it as a cover, okay, to cover her jug. Okay, now the Rashbam points out, what about ona'ah? In other words, she paid, let's say it was $100 shtar chov. Let's say she bought it for $90. Okay, you're not going to take a piece of aluminum foil isn't worth $90, right? So, he deals with that issue. Okay, but that's basically what he, yeah, I don't know. I have to look now. I didn't look. I just looked now as we were. I have to look back at that Rashbam. Anyway, we'll start with that tomorrow. So basically, he seems to say that could be used for something else, and therefore there really is a need to write that in the document. And that's really what we referred to in the first place. It just by passing it over isn't really sufficient. Okay, so let's review our daf. We can also use the study guide as a guide to go through. Again, we did two basic things. One was to try to figure out, is Rav and Shmuel, are they debating the same thing that Tanna kamma, Rabbi Natan debated before them? Which we thought at first, it took us a little while till we even got there to try to establish. We had to reread this braita a number of times till we got to the fact that they both agree in Mashiach have a boat, and then thought, oh, well, that must mean that they argue about that. Then we said, no, that can't be what they're arguing about. Could be they actually agree about the boat and really only disagree about the promissory note. And then once we talked about them disagreeing about the promissory note, we said, oh, by the way, this debate, Tanna kamma and Rabbi Natan, is the exact same debate as Rebbi and the rabbis. And that took us a little while to figure out, is that really true? We had some issues with it, and which I just reviewed, so I'm not going to review again. And then we got to the very last part of the daf, which is Rav Papa added this issue about what words you have to put in this promissory note when you actually sell a shtar chov. And Rav Ashi didn't really understand why, and Rav Kahana explained it. And that's where we ended today. We're going to continue with this into tomorrow's daf. Wishing everyone a good day. I will point out I'll tell you now for those on Zoom that I'll be away for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, like just before Rosh Hashanah. So starting on the 20th, which is a Friday, we'll go back to not having Zoom. The shiurim will go up early in the morning. From there through Rosh Hashanah. I'll probably post the Rosh Hashanah dapim early because it's a 3-day chag and it'll all be pre-recorded. So from there through Rosh Hashanah. So starting the day after Rosh Hashanah, so Gedalia, we will start up again. So those days there will not be Zoom, and I'll be in Riverdale for Shabbat, speaking to scholar in residence on the 20th. So if anybody is there and wants to hear, you can come. There'll be some shiurim over Shabbat. You can ask us for details, and don't forget about the Masa le Rosh Hashanah to sign up and get others to join as well. Have a good day.